In this video, we will continue calculating the rest of the statistics. In the previous video, we calculated the probability, and in this one, we will calculate the rest of it. Alright, so the next thing, we can calculate the wins and losses for each round of the game. So at the end, we will display how many wins or losses happen in round 1, how many in round 2, etc., all the way up to round 20, and then we will also display how many wins or losses happened in round 21 or more. Okay, so to capture the result of each round, we will utilize the wins and losses arrays. After each game, we will calculate how many rounds it took and what the result of the game was, meaning was it a win or was it a loss, and we will add +1 to the index that corresponds with the number of rounds. So for example, if he won the game and it took 3 rounds, then we will add +1 to our array wins to the index of 3. If he lost the game and it took 5 rounds, then we will add +1 to the index of 5 in the array losses. So let's create a method that will process it. So let's go back to my statistics class, and I'm going to create a method called setStats. Now we need to know two things. First, how many rounds it took, and second, what the result of the game was. So we will pass an integer argument that will be the number of rounds and the result of the game. So that's my number of rounds, and we already have the results captured in the craps game class right here in the game's status, because we are using the enumeration to display win, lose, or continue. Alright, so now within the body of the method, we can check what the status of the game was. We are only interested in wins or losses. The continue status is used only until the game finishes, but we are only interested in already finished games. So we can use a simple if statement that checks what the result of the game was. So we'll code if the result equals crapsgame.games status.win. So if the game was a win, we will add +1 to the index that corresponds with the number of rounds played. However, keep in mind that we are only capturing up to 20 rounds. Everything above 20 rounds is placed together into one number, which is the index 21 in the array. So first, we need to know if the game took 20 rounds or less. So we'll do another if statement, and we'll ask if the round is less or equal to 20. And if this is the case, we will add +1 to the index that corresponds with the number of rounds played. And since the game was won, we are using the wins array. So we'll do wins with the index of round, and we'll add +1. Else, meaning it took more than 20 rounds, we will simply add +1 to the index 21, which kind of holds all the games together that took more than 20 rounds. And of course, we do the same for the lost games. So I'm going to do an else if statement. So if it's not a win status, we'll check if the result of the game was a loss. And just like before, we'll check how many rounds it took. So I'll just copy it and place it here. However, we are using the lose array because these are the lost games. So our losses array. Alright, the next thing we need, of course, to edit craps game class, but before we do, let's create a function that will calculate the average length of the game, as the assignment wants us to do. Basically, it will calculate how many rounds on average our games lasted. So I'm creating another function that returns double, which is going to be the average calculated from this function. Alright, so next we need two variables. We need a double to hold the average, and we need an integer that will be the sum of all rounds. And to calculate the average, we simply divide all the rounds that we played with all the games that we played. So for example, if we played 2 games and the first game lasted 3 rounds and the second lasted 5 rounds, then we played a total of 8 rounds in 2 games, so 8 divided by 2 will give us an average of 4 rounds per game. So first, we need to calculate the number of rounds played. For that, we will use a for loop. However, we start the loop from index 1 because each game had at least one round, and by round, of course, I'm talking about the rolls. One roll is basically one round of the game, and there is no 0 rolls or 0 rounds. And we know we have 21 indexes, so we will loop from 1 to the last index, which is 21. So here is my for loop from 1 to 21. And remember, the indexes in the wins and losses arrays represent the rounds. So index 1 is round 1, index 2 is round 2, etc. But the index 21 represents games that took more than 20 rounds, so some games could take 21 rounds, others 22 rounds, and others even more. So the calculation will not be exact. However, it will be very close because it is safe to assume that only a significant number of games will last more than 20 rounds. Anyway, how do we get the total of all rounds played? Well, it's actually very simple. We'll add together all the rounds it took to win games plus all the rounds it took to lose games. So let's start with the winning rounds. So say we play 10 games and we won 7 of them. So our wins array will look like this, for example. What this shows is that we won one game in round 1. So our index 1 has value of 1, and that represents one game won in the first round. We won 2 games in round 3. There was nothing in round 2, but we won 2 games over here in round 3. And we won another game in round 4 and another game in round 5, then nothing, and then we won 2 games in round 11. So the calculation goes like this. We will simply multiply the round number with the number of games that ended with that number of rounds. So we won 1 game in round 1, so we multiply it by 1. We didn't win anything in round 2, so we'll multiply it by 0. But we won 2 games in round 3, so we multiply 3 times 2. 1 game in round 4, so 4 times 1. 1 game in round 5, so 5 times 1. And then 2 games in round 11, so 11 times 2. So that, when you add it all together, gives us total rounds equals 28. And of course, we use the same calculations to calculate the rounds for our losing games. And at the end, we add the 2 results together, and that will give us all the rounds played together. So how it is going to look in the code? So this is the formula. We loop through all the indexes and we perform the multiplication of the index itself, which is basically the round number, multiplied by the value stored in that index, which is the number of games that happened to finish with that number of rounds. And we do that for wins and losses and add them together. See, I told you, very simple. And now we can calculate the average. Obviously, average is easy to calculate. We simply divide all our rounds played by all the games played. So, as we did for the calculating the probability, we will use the sum of all wins added together with sum of all losses to calculate the number of games that we played. So the average will equal sum of rounds divided by all the games played. So again, I'm using the sum method of the array for wins and losses and add them together. And finally, we return the average from our function. Alright, so that's our statistics class. Now we need to make it work within our Krebs game class.